Yo, what's good? Hey, what up? How are you guys doing? I am here to post an updated guide on Kled's runes and items. This is as of July 16th, 2024. And the new patch is tomorrow. There's no item changes in this patch, but this is updated as of 14.14. Seems like a good time to make a new one. My last item guide video was at the very beginning of the season, the season 14 patch. So not that much has changed in terms of items and runes, but there have been a few changes, enough to make my last video outdated. So I wanted to make a new one, just a quick video, talking about what I'm running right now in terms of runes and items and why, just in case anybody was wondering, or if you haven't played since the beginning of the season. This will just be a quick explanation on what's good right now, at least in my opinion, on Kled. And yeah, for the runes, it's very straightforward. I mean, all they've done with the runes for the past like year or two is just nerf everything that's good. So like the runes right now is like everything feels extremely useless outside of a few runes. You know, every champion kind of has like their default runes now. There's not really any variation when it comes to these anymore. You're not really thinking about it anymore, at least in my opinion. You're kind of running the same thing every game. And right now for Kled, the only viable rune page, in my opinion, everything else has been like obliterated. The only viable rune page right now is Conquer with Sorcery Secondary. So Conquer, you know, has always been good on Kled, always been his best keystone for a long time now. They changed Press the Attack a little bit. And I know some people were asking about that, but the thing with Press the Attack is that it's only really better in laning phase. It's stronger in lane 100%. The proc damage mainly is the reason for that. So it's definitely stronger in lane. You'd have higher kill pressure early, excuse me. But for the rest of the game, the AD given by Conquer, the AD and the healing given by Conquer is just going to outclass it. You know, Kled's AD ratios are very high. Plus, he builds items that have AD scaling, like Hydra and sometimes Eclipse, for example. So just having more AD plus the healing is just way better, especially because Kled stacks it quickly. On top of that, anything in this game, right now, in this meta, anything that's only strong like early and falls off later is pretty much like just complete bait. You know, this season is very, very like anti-snowball. You know, getting a lane lead is not only hard, but it's also irrelevant even if you get one. So I wouldn't recommend anything that's meant to snowball you early and then is not as useful later. You just want to take things that are better mid-late game, because every game is going to drag on to those points. This is a very slow pace meta. You know, they nerfed early game, kills a lot, kill gold, kill XP, you know, respawn timers are ridiculously low. So anything that's meant to snowball you is pretty much terrible. Like it's like really terrible. Should only take things that scale well, and you know, if you win your lane, you win your lane regardless, most of the time anyway, through just playing better. So you don't really need to focus on anything like that. So yeah, Conquer, you know, second row Triumph is the only option. You can't use Presence of Mind, of course, and Absorb Life is worthless unless you're like a ranged champ that can farm this safely. You know, heal up safely against like a lower range target who can't pressure you. You know, they combo with Fleet a lot, like champs like Tristana mid and stuff. They go Fleet plus Absorb Life, like that's good, but I mean, a champ like Kled, you're not going to be able to just heal up like that early game. Plus Triumph just has so much synergy with him, you know, ensuring your remount, or at least helping you get your remount off by healing you as you get a kill. You know, while you're getting the courage. And then this third row is like, you know, they've gutted Bloodline. Lifesteal's not that useful on Kled either. So this is irrelevant. Your only two options are Alacrity and Haste. This is completely preference. I think you can choose whatever you like more. I know a lot of people prefer Alacrity because they feel like it's hard to farm without it early game with the initial attack speed. You know, personally, I prefer the Haste. 15 ability haste. It doesn't work on your ultimate. It's only basic ability haste, but 15 ability haste from a rune for free is really strong, especially on a champ like Kled, where haste is like one of his most important stats. You know, like AD, Pen, and Haste are his best stats. So getting 15 Haste from your runes for doing nothing but just farming and, you know, just playing is really strong. And plus, Haste gives you attack speed anyway because it lowers your W cooldown, which is 150% attack speed, of course. So the only downside is that it does nothing early game. Like early levels, Alacrity is stronger, and Haste just scales better, which again, I mean, just goes back to the PTA Conquer thing. So I prefer Haste. And then this last row, you know, they did a rework cut down. It's more about like initial burst damage. So it does more damage when the champion is high on health. So it kind of helps you burst people faster. So I honestly think this is a decent option when you're going like, you know, heavy AD pen builds against squishy teams. This could actually be good. I haven't taken it that much though. I've been mostly sticking with Last Stand, of course, because of the dismount synergy. I mean, a lot of your damage comes off when you're dismounted. You know, a really common scenario for Kled is to EQ somebody, dismount, and then you still have your bear trap pull, and then you dismount Q, get to the 4th auto. Like, usually that all happens when you're under 60% health or lower. So I usually just default Last Stand anyway. I mean, as long as you take one of these two, I think you're good. I mean, Ku is just like, this is just pointless. Helping you execute people are low, it doesn't matter. So as long as you're taking one of these two, you're good. And for the secondary tree, the only one that's still useful, really, is Sorcery. Again, I mean, like I said, AD and Haste are some of his most important stats. It's pretty self-explanatory. These just give you AD and Haste for free. Again, they're scaling, but every game in this season goes to like around 30 minutes at least. Again, it's a very slow-paced meta, so a lot of your games are going to go on past 25-30 minutes. You know, and this scales pretty quickly. This is only level 8. At level 8, it's already giving you 10 haste. So usually you'll finish this, and then you'll finish the Legend Haste after. So together, you know, that's 25 haste from your runes alone, which is, you know, that's a lot. It's a lot to get for free for doing nothing. So those are strong, and then Gathering Storm, yeah, I mean, even at the 20-minute mark, 1480 is pretty nice. And then obviously it gets to, you know, gets way better afterwards, 30, 50. But yeah, 14, 30 AD is usually where you're going to be getting from this most games, and yeah, that's pretty strong. And then this bottom row, again, I just go double Adaptive Force. This last row, you can take whatever you want. I usually just switch between health and tenacity based on how much CC the enemy team has. If they're lower CC, I go health. If they have any kind of relevant CC, I go tenacity. Scaling health I don't usually bother with, since you might as well just take something that helps you earlier. Now, I guess this goes against what I said earlier, but honestly, like, it makes like no difference. It's like 65 or twice as much, but at level 18, which is like nothing. Late game, another 60 health is basically nothing. So, I mean, honestly, you can take whatever you want in this bottom row. They're all pretty useless. To be honest, like, you won't notice any of these, like 90% of the time. You might be wondering why not go any of the other trees. Well, Domination used to be very strong because of Sudden Impact and Ingenious Hunter. But as you can see, I mean, they removed Ingenious Hunter from the game. That was the rune that lowered item active and passive CD. A lot of people were spam going Ingenious Hunter on like a lot of champs this whole season, because there's just a lot of items in the game right now that have cooldowns, whether they're an active or a passive. So yeah, it became really common on like everybody. And instead of buffing other runes to you know, compete with it, they just removed it from the game. So there's just no Ingenious Hunter. And Sudden Impact gave you, you know, just free Armor Pen and Magic Pen every time you dashed. And you could have 100% uptime on it as long as you kept dashing. So that was obviously very strong. Free pen for just moving was nice. But yeah, as you can see, it doesn't do that anymore. And now, after you dash, you just get like a weak true damage proc. And it's on a 10-second cooldown. So it's essentially like Cheap Shot, but with a longer cooldown for slightly more damage. And a different way of proccing it. You have to dash to proc it. Or kind of stealth, I guess. Yeah, this is useless. Again, this is only useful early, and then it becomes irrelevant later. So in this meta, it's pointless, in my opinion. And no Ingenious Hunter. Every other rune in this tree is not useful. I mean, Eyeball Collection takes way too long to stack. You know, these other Hunter runes are not useful. Relentless Hunter, you know, I mean, you already go Yomu's. I already go Yomu's most of the time, which serves this purpose. They also nerfed the initial move speed on this. It used to give you initial move speed out of combat. That's what it was, and they got rid of that. You have to stack it before it does anything. Ultimate Hunter, again, pointless. I mean, if you build Axiom Arc, it's overkill. If you don't build it, I mean, your regular haste is enough. And Treasure Hunter is useless on everybody except for maybe junglers. You know, Resolve. Yeah, I mean, Demolish. I know some people really like going Demolish for early plates. Like I said, I mean, this is just like a snowball rune. Because later in the game, you're going to one-shot the tower as soon as you reach it anyway. You'll never even proc the Demolish with a normal build. The towers die so fast with items. So it's only useful early game to get early plates, but you're never going to be able to proc it anyway because enemy's going to respawn instantly and teleport back. Anytime you kill somebody early levels, they're just going to instantly respawn and be in lane before you can even... You need to reset as fast as possible. And even if you get to the plate, they nerfed how much gold the plates give you. So it's just not even worth it. Honestly, it just baits you into putting yourself in a bad position. Everything else here, it sucks. I got rid of the tenacity in this tree as well. I used to go in flinching sometimes for additional tenacity. It's removed. They replaced it with this rune, which I don't even know why this is in the game, since it does nothing. Like, this is just completely useless. 2 armor and MR, win crowd controlled, and for 2 seconds after. Why do they write it like that? I guess because they wanted you to know it was the CC duration plus 2 seconds, but it's so weird. Yeah, this tree is not really useful. Revitalize is okay, but you know, triple tonic, Kled getting an additional skill point. I don't think he benefits that much from it, which is like a big part of this rune. Also, you know, you get the power spike at level 6, but for what? Kled's ultimate is not really a 1v1 power spike, so it doesn't really change anything. So, like I said, every other rune tree I feel like is just bait on Kled at least. So this is pretty much all I run, and that's what I'd recommend. Okay, now getting to the items. The items are pretty straightforward. I'll first talk about starting items real quick since it's very simple. You know, when you're level 1, you're looking at your lane opponent. All I think about is my lane opponent a melee champ? If they're a melee champion, I'm going Doranblade, like basically 95% of the time. If it's a melee champ, I'm just going Doranblade. You know, it gives you the most combat stats. It's pretty straightforward. Kled benefits from all of these and the lifesteal, since he autos a lot, both the wave and on champs. And just the AD and health is good. If it's a ranged champion, then I'm just thinking, is it a ranged champion that has a lot of poke and I can't really touch them? Then Doran Shield, again, is your choice 95% of the time. The only 5% for both of these that are like exceptions are really rare things. Singed. When I'm against a Singed, I always start Cull, because Singed players usually start proxing either right away or very quickly into laning phase. They just start proxing you, and you can't mess with them. It's like a waste of time. So usually you're just sitting under tower farming. So that's one melee champ I go Cull. There might be a couple others, but that's pretty much one of the big exceptions. And then I know some people like to greed and go like longsword pots, mainly so they can get to their first item faster. It's okay, but pots have been so nerfed. I just don't want any pots in my inventory at all. Like, the less money you can spend on potions, the better, in my opinion. Not only have they nerfed potions, but most of the time you're going back to your lane, you're going to TP back anyway. Or you're dead, and then you're going to respawn with home guards and run to lane. So I don't, like, there's not really many scenarios where you're like, wanting multiple pots. After your very after your very first potion that you purchase with your Dorn item, I never buy another pot after that. I don't think you should either. It's a waste of money. Yeah, I don't even consider refillable potion again, because the only benefit of refillable is if you can repeatedly back and, you know, keep getting more pots, which you're not going to be able to do. So yeah, starting out is pretty straightforward. That's all I really consider on those items. Trinkets, you can buy whatever you want. I usually just sit on sweeper mid game and then transition to Farsight later. Excuse me. Unless I'm not roaming at all, then I'll just go straight to blue. But usually mid game you roam a lot on Kled, so sweeper is good to sit on sometimes. But yeah, the trinkets are completely preference. So now the standard build, this is my most common build. This is probably what I build like 70 to 80% of my games, to be honest. is a build that looks extremely similar to this. And it's pretty straightforward. Again, what I said earlier, Kled's most important stats right now, and have been for a long time, are AD, Pen, and Haste. So you're just stacking anything that gives you, as much AD, Pen, and Haste as possible. You're just stacking those items. So Hubris is generally my first item. The item itself has a very easy build path. You can just go straight 4 longswords until you can build it. Yeah, they nerfed a lot of the tier 2 item pieces, so usually you just stack the tier 1 pieces, and then you only upgrade if you have to. If you don't have enough gold for the full item, you have nothing else to buy. But yeah, it has a very easy build path. It's only 3k gold, so not too expensive, and it just gives you high AD, a lot of lethality, and a lot of haste. And then the passive has stacking AD based on your takedowns. Here it says based on kills, but it's not. It says based on kills on kill. Okay, you have to really bear with the fucking client, bro, with these item descriptions. It's not on kill only though. You gain AD on any takedown where you damage the champion recently. It will stack this passive, and the passive just gives you more AD, starting with a plus 15 buff, and then it gives you an extra 2 AD for every takedown. You cannot lose your stacks in any way outside of the buff timing out after 90 seconds, which is a long time. But there's no cooldown on refreshing that passive. There's no cooldown on stacking. There's no penalty to dying or anything. So it's very easy for this item to give you like 80, 90, 100 AD total on top of the lethality and haste. I hear a lot of people say that they're like, oh, well, if I'm not snowballing, if I'm not super fed, I shouldn't buy it. But that's not really how it works. I mean, you only need it with only 5. If you buy this item and then get 5 takedowns, so like 2 kills and 3 assists, the item is already giving you 85 total AD. Because that would be enough for the passive plus the base 60 to be 85. With literally just 2 kills, 3 assists, something simple like that. And that's like a slow-ass paced game. This is like a very slow-paced game for you to only have 5 KP. Even that is giving you 85 AD total, which is the most you can get on one item. I guess outside of like stacking items like Rune Man or whatever. And then, I feel like a lot of my games, I usually get to around 90 to over 100 AD. Because like I said, most games drag on pretty long, and for the first like 20 minutes of the game, the death timers are so low. If you're winning your lane, your laner is like coming back and just dying on repeat, because they just respawn so fast. And if you're not killing your laner, you're usually roaming a lot with Kled, and most of the time you're roaming bot lane, which means that's like a free 2 takedowns if this is like a successful roam on your ult CD, which is only every couple of minutes. Or less with haste. So it's very easy to stack this item, and the benefit is so high, and there's no risk involved because there's no way to lose the stacks or anything. Worst case scenario is you buy the item and you proceed to get 0 KP for the rest of the game, in which case, you probably didn't matter at all in this game anyway. So yeah, this item is really common. Buy most of my games, like I said, like 70-80% of my games. And then I pretty much always follow that up with Profane Hydra, just because this one item is such a strong spike. I don't think you should bother delaying it at all after your first item to just give this Hydra passive AD and Pen to like synergize with. Because you might be wondering why not just rush the Profane then if it's such a strong spike. But because the active and the passive, the Cleave, since it is a Hydra item, since it has such a high AD scaling, it's like 130% AD scaling, I think you benefit a lot by building a high AD and Pen item first to really make the splash and active really strong. And then again, outside of that, it's pretty straightforward. Just a lot of AD, Pen, and haste, a really strong active, a very burst focus active. It makes you wave clear instantly, which Kled really needs. He really needs some type of wave clear item. You're going to need a Hydra no matter what build you go, you're going to need a Hydra. Kled's wave clear is just really bad without it. If you've played Kled, you've definitely noticed. But yeah, Hubris, Profane, and then I personally don't build Percent Pen third. I feel like that's a little bit too early. So I usually just go another AD lethality item. So you can go whatever you want here. Youmuu's Voltaic, Serpent's Opportunity, whichever one you prefer. I prefer Youmu's the most. They're all similar gold. But I prefer Youmu's generally because of the move speed out of combat as well as in combat. It just lets you run around the map a lot faster, which one accelerates your income because you can get to waves faster, get to camps faster, you know, use more of your roam timer, like more efficiently, I should say. Just moving around the map a lot helps you, especially because if you have seen my recent games or my recent streams, you'll know that I almost never go tier 2 boots. I usually just sit on tier 1s and sell them at some point, or just don't go boots at all. So I really value the, you know, combined move speed from this item, both from the passive and the active, over the lethality items. Of course, if I feel like I really need Serpents, I'll go Serpents first, and then maybe build Youmu's later, but yeah, if you don't really need anti-shield, this is what I think is the best third item, the best just overall damage item. And then when you do get to the point of the game where you're going to need percent pen, which is pretty much every game, because even if they're not building armor, once you're like late into the game, champions base armor are almost all over 100. Even range champs can get like 100 armor with levels with no items, and you know that's not including, you know, maybe they have a mountain dragon or a champion that gives them armor, or maybe they build a one armor item like Tabai or GA or Zanya's. So even squishy champs will have enough armor to make armor pen worth it, percent armor pen. And plus, percent armor pen just has so much synergy with lethality that you should always be pairing them anyway, unless they have absolutely zero armor and they're like 5 squishy champs, like the squishy champs known to man, like they have 5 Malzars or something. Otherwise, you're always going to build percent pen. And 4% pen, this is by far the best one. It's not even really close. You know, they did buff Sorelda's a little bit this patch to make it not as bad. They buffed the base percent armor pen. It's not showing here on the client, but they buffed it to 25%. So it's 25% plus additional percent pen based on your lethality. Even with a full lethality build, like 6, you know, sell your boots, 6 full lethality items. With this, it still does not reach 40% armor pen. On top of that, it's 200 more gold. It does give you haste, but because I have 25 haste from my runes and I build 2 haste items earlier, and the addition of the global blue buff, you know, after the 20-minute mark, every time your team kills blue buff, it gives it to your whole team. So that's, you know, 25 haste from your runes, 10 haste from the blue buff, and then 35 haste from your first 2 items. I think you have more than enough haste at this point that you can sacrifice a little bit for, instead this gives you crit chance. Now it's 25% crit chance. They changed every crit item to be 25%. Your crits are really, really strong, even if you're not building crit, like you're not building around crit at all, but just having a lot of AD and pen, and you know, naturally you're gonna have a lot of attack speed because your W is gonna be almost always up with this type of build. You're going to crit people, and when you do, I mean, it's gonna like obliterate them. Nobody can tank this. When you have this item, nobody can tank you. There's nobody in the game that can actually tank your damage. When you're like 4 or 5 items with this type of build. The only way is like if you just can't fight back because you're just CC'd, or they have like multiple ways of being invincible or whatever. But if you can actually get on somebody with this build, I mean, you're just gonna kill them. And this is why this build is generally the most common, is Kled, he functions the best as like an assassin. So you're just going to be side laning, you know, trying to 1v1 whoever tries to match you, and then when you do decide to rotate with your R or with your TP, you just want to have that initial burst to just one-shot whoever you can reach with your R or flash or whatever. That's the most useful way to play him. This build also lets you decimate towers because pen works on towers. Both percent pen and lethality works on towers. And since Kled is mostly a side laning assassin split pusher type of champ, you know, this helps you do everything. This type of build helps you do everything you'd want to do, which is why it's the most common build and the build I usually recommend for carrying. And then you're going to pretty much finish your build with an Axiom Mark. You know, pretty much goes back to what I just said about rotating with your ultimate. You know, I feel like if you're trying to carry with Kled, you need Axiom Mark, because you need to play around your ultimate as much as possible when it comes to carrying. You know, this item allows you to use your ultimate, for example, to just dive whoever matches you in the side lane. You can use your ultimate 1v1 to dive them. You know, hopefully, most likely one-shot them with this type of build. And then, when it's later in the game, which is when you're going to buy, this is like a 5th, 6th item type of thing, their death timer at that point in the game should be long enough to where this item will refund your ultimate, enough of your ultimate, to where you can use your ult again before they respawn. So a really common scenario is, like I said, I'll use my ultimate to dive somebody 1v1, and then I'll back up, I'll go push out the wave, and then my ultimate will be up again, and I'll be able to force a 5v4 with my team while the person I just killed is still respawning. So you can put your team in a lot of winning positions with this item, and again, I think it's really crucial for like carrying with Kled. I honestly find it really difficult to carry without this if I plan on going lethality. So yeah, this is my most common build, and that's why. I mean, obviously there's items missing here because there's only 5 items, because I sell my boots. So, you know, your last item is just situational. It just depends on the game. You can really choose any of these, and I think you're chilling. These are all good options. You know, Opportunity is just like another Yomu's. Voltaic is something I situationally replace with, I replace my Hubris with Voltaic, and that would only be because I am against a mobile range champion, such as Jace or Kennen, or, I don't know, Quintop, or Vayne, somebody with range and some type of self-peel or mobility. If I'm against one of those champs and I don't plan on roaming immediately, I will sometimes go Voltaic first just for the immediate kill pressure. Of course, this item slows them by like 100% when you auto-attack them. So it allows you to just dash on them. And most of those champs, you're not going to be able to hit your E on them because they have too much range. If they're playing correctly, if a Kennen or a Vayne or a Quinn, if they're playing correctly, you can't hit them with your E because they're too far. So this allows you to just E into range to auto-attack them. Then with the slow, it'll let you hit your Q and be able to stick to them for the kill. I mean, most of those champs, if you do land the slow on them and then you land your combo, you should be able to kill them as long as you're not, you know, behind. So sometimes I build this first and then build the rest later. You could build this late into the game, but it's not as useful since the proc is only 100 flat damage, no scaling. So usually if I don't build it early, I don't build it at all, but it's not bad. It still gives you good stats. It's still cheap, so you could do it. You know, Serpents explains itself. There's a lot of shielding in the game right now, like a ridiculous amount of shielding. There's a lot of items that shield you that are really popular. A lot of AD assassins and bruisers build Eclipse, which shields you, obviously. A lot of mages build Seraphs, which is a huge, huge shield. A lot of supports build Locket. There's a lot of enchanters, you know, shield. But there's just a lot of shields in the game, both from items and champs. So I end up building Serpents a lot. That usually ends up being my 6-item build. I usually have Serpents somewhere because of that, because of how common shielding is. And because Kled is a melee AD champ. So he's one of the few champs that can actually use this item, and it's not like it's not setting you back at all. He has full efficiency because it's weaker on range champs. And then of course Maw, you know, Maw is still a really strong item if there's AP burst. Like I said, this is AP burst. I usually only build this against burst champs, so something like Echo or Akali. I'd build a Maw. I don't usually bother building this if their fed AP champ is like a DPS based like mage, like a Zir or a Nivea, because it doesn't help you as much since the shield doesn't last too long. So it's mostly for anti-burst AP assassins, stuff like that. Collector is another like final item option if you don't need Serpents and you don't feel like going Opportunity. You can go Collector at 50% crit. Executes whatever, but they did nerf it a little bit since they nerfed lethality on it, but it's still a good option late game. And then my least common final options are PD and IE. I used to build crit more often at the beginning of the season, but since then, like I said, they've nerfed Collector a little bit and they nerfed IE. So these two things combined made me not really itemize for crit as much and just focus on AD and Pen with a little bit of crit. But both these items still work great. I mean, PD alone, again, it gives you move speed, which is nice for people like me who don't go tier 2 boots. And with just this one item, you have max attack speed. You'll reach 2.5 or almost 2.5 with only this item and your W. And your W's up really often, so that's nice. And then IE again, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but it's only really good if you can, if you're fighting targets that you can actually auto multiple times. So like tanky targets with not a lot of mobility. Crit builds work a little bit better against them. But a lot of tanks can buy Randuins, and Randuins is really strong. So I usually don't bother. But I know, you know, these are still strong items, they're still strong options. So yeah, this is all the most common stuff. And then this is another build that I've been going a little bit more recently. I mean, this has always been like a good build on Kled, but I've been trying it a little bit more recently. It's actually pretty good. Because there are some situations where you are against a tank or just a tanky target in general. So you're against a tank, let's say like Ornn or Zac, or you're just against a tanky champ that's like only sidelining. So for example, like, you know, like a Set, a split pushing Set, or a split pushing Renekton, or a split pushing Garen is another one, like a Darius, like a tanky champ that's just only sidelining, let's say. They're not really grouping, and you don't have the ability to roam, because there's not always roam opportunities available. Sometimes you're in a game where the enemy bot lane is like Draven Janna. Like, oh, that's just an example. Like, that's something, if I looked at that, I'm like, okay, I can't gank them. Like Janna, Ezreal, like something like that, they're like, oh, okay, they're untouchable. So it's like a waste of time to roam. And let's say your bot lane is like Yuumi, Zeri, or something with no setup. It's like, okay, I can't really roam there. Their mid laner might be a control mage like Azir or Victor with Zhonya's or Anivia. It's like, okay, I can't really dive them. So in that situation, your only choice is to continue to sideline against this tank or tanky target. And when you're doing that, you do want to build to just make sure that you can 1v1 them, because if you can't even match them, then you're useless. If you can't match them and you can't roam, then you're actually useless. So this build makes it really easy to match those type of champs. Like, it honestly is like extremely easy. So it's pretty similar. You know, they still got Youmu's and, you know, LDR with just AD haste pen. The difference is you're going Ravenous instead of Profane, because you're sidelining so much more, because you want to stay on the map longer, because you want to force these champs to match you. You don't want them to be able to group. Like, for example, you're against like an Ornn or a Malphite. Obviously, they pick those champs because they want to group. They want a team fight eventually. But if you're just permanently staying on the map full HP, shoving with Ravenous, like, you know, and it's going to make it really difficult for them to rotate and help their team. They're just going to be stuck under tower trying to deal with you. So this item lets you just ignore all their poke. You know, these champs are usually pretty low burst. They try to like whittle you down until you're in kill range, but with Ravenous, you can just ignore all of that and just heal through them. It heals you so much. Like, using this active on the wave, like, full heals you almost. So it lets you stay mounted for a long time and just stay on the map for a long time, killing camps, still full health. So in those kind of games where you're rarely grouping, it's really strong. I still pair it with Youmu's for the same reasons I said earlier, for the mobility. Again, I still sell my boots here. And I know some people like going LDR earlier because they're against that tank, but I still don't think it's worth it, especially with how cheap Youmu's is, and how it accelerates your income with the mobility. I still think it's worth it getting this before getting any type of percent pen, even against a tank. I'd rather just, I usually just choose to ignore them. When I'm in that phase where they're too tanky to kill, I usually choose to just ignore them and just farm and just get myself as fed as possible, then build the pen later. You know, with these 3 items, you can 1v1 any tank. And to make it, like, impossibly easy, I followed up with Eclipse. I mean, I truly think any tank, if you're against, like, an Ornn or a Malphite, like I said, or, you know, a Zac or a Set, like, I think if you have Ravenous, Eclipse, LDR, and then another lethality item, or just AD item, I think you can beat, like, almost any tanky target, 1v1. You can usually just face tank them with Ravenous Eclipse, and then you deal untankable damage with this much pen. And then you can finish it up with like Hullbreaker, Maw. I put Maw here because most tanks deal magic damage, such as Ornn. Most of Ornn's magic damage, or excuse me, most of Ornn's damage to you is going to be magic. You know, Zac is all magic. You know, there's some AD tanks like Poppy and Cassante, but most tanks are pretty magic damage heavy, so Maw is just like another thing to just perma tank them. It gives you more vamp. And then Hullbreaker is just here to amplify your side laning. You might be thinking, well, this is like HP scaling. If you already know that, the proc to the tower and to champs is HP scaling. So you might be thinking this probably isn't good because I don't have any HP, but it is max HP scaling. So that means that it's counting both of Kled and Skarl's health. So it's always dealing like a pretty high amount of damage. And yeah, against tanky targets, you're going to proc it consistently, you know, multiple times because you're going to be able to auto them a lot. And then the item stats itself are good. So, you know, this is pretty good for that side lane playstyle. And this is my, you know, actually, before I show you this last build, I'll show you I'll show you an example of when I would go that build instead of the normal build. So as you can see, I usually go this type of build. You know, Youmuu's here. I went Voltaire because I was going to Rise, for example, a range champ with mobility. Well, he has the move speed and he has self-peel. And their team is pretty range heavy in general. So you can see here, this is like a typical build, full heavy into lethality. And then this is an example of a game where I didn't want to go full lethality. And I'll explain why. As you can see here, my bot lane is Zeri Janna. Okay, so if I gank for them, they provide nothing to me. Like, they have no type of engage or, you know, really anything or setup. You know, they're a very safe combo, but they don't really help you at all if you showed up. It would have to all be on you. And their bot lane is Corki, Milio with Exhaust. They're like untouchable. I mean, Milio just self-peels you with his Q. He's just going to exhaust me because I'm going to be the only person in range. You know, he has the cleanse. Corki has his W, his barrier. I mean, this is a waste of time. Like, when I'm looking at that bot lane and my bot lane, I'm like, it's a waste of time to gank them. Excuse me, my mid laner's like Katarina. Again, she's not going to help you at all if you gank her. So I'm like, okay, well, my only option here is to match my lane opponent, which was an Ornn. And as you can see, he was completely useless against me. Because he literally cannot match you. He cannot beat you with this build. You ignore all of his damage, and then you deal untankable damage with this much AD pen and max health damage. So I made the game extremely easy to carry. And yeah, I'll show you the final build. And this is the least common one. Honestly, I only build this in very, very specific scenarios, or if I just feel like doing it for fun, just for like variety's sake, just to try something different. And as you can see, it's pretty much like a really, really old school type of like Bruiser build. This is like a season like 6, 7 type of build with like Cleaver, Youmuu's Titanic. This is a really old Kled build. If you played Kled for that long, or have seen old videos of mine or other Kled players, this is like a really old build. The reason it's fallen out of favor and is not common anymore is because there's so much max HP damage in the game. Almost every new champion has some type of percent HP damage, whether it's like max HP or current HP, or they'll build it, like they'll build Eclipse, which is max HP, or they'll build Bork, which is current, or they'll build Leandries, which is max HP, or they'll build something. You know, there's so much max HP damage, percent HP damage in the game, so it makes these type of builds not really work because all of these Bruiser items that are like strong, they just give you so much HP, flat HP with no resist. So you just end up getting shredded by these, you know, common champs and items. So you don't even get to like, you're not tanky at all most of the time. So the only time I consider going this type of build is if they have, if I can look at their team, you just have to know which champs deal percent HP damage and which champs build percent HP damage. If you know that and you can look at their comp and say, okay, they have like very little or none on their team, like no champs that build it, no champs that have it, or at least a very low amount, then you can potentially go a build like this. And in that scenario, then you'll actually be kind of tanky with all the HP if you're against all flat damage dealing champs. So just to show you an example to make it easier to understand, I mean, this is a game where I built it, and even here, they still have some percent HP damage. It's like impossible to have none in this meta. But their only percent HP damage here is they have Ace Soul, who has it himself, and he builds Leandri's. And Sejuani does a tiny bit of max HP on her stun proc. Every time she procs her stun, it does max HP. So there's only 2 sources, and one of them is pretty low. And the other one is Ace Soul, who I'm never gonna match. Like, in this game, I'm looking at their comp, I'm like, again, I can't gank Caitlyn. Plus my Bond didn't need it this game. And I can't really interact with Ace Soul anyway. If he comes to match me, he's just gonna clear the wave under tower, and that's it. So I don't really have to worry about him. I'm really only worried about my lane opponent, which is Garen. And Garen, he has missing HP on his ultimate, of course. But if you dismount against Garen, you're dead no matter what. Like, you are just dead. If you're dismounting and he has his R, it's just going to one-shot you no matter what. So this build lets you, not get dismounted. He can't really dismount you through all this HP since he doesn't do any percent HP damage, and he doesn't build any. With this type of build, I've done this against Garen, I've done this against Darius, Riven, champs that have like big executes that just kill you instantly. This type of build that prevents you from dismounting is pretty strong against them. I mean, for that reason, the Garen couldn't dismount me. Most of the time the person that's ganking me is going to be Sedge, the jungler, and her percentage damage is pretty low as well. So I could just face tank them and still deal a lot of DPS, because this build does a lot of damage. You get a lot of AD and pen from a combination of Cleaver, Youmu's. Overlords gives you more AD based on your bonus health. Another reason this build is something I've tried a little bit more is because they did fix a bug with Shojin. I'm not sure this was a known thing to other people, but Shojin, it amplifies your ability damage, but it never amplified Kled's W damage. It just didn't. It was just something that just didn't work. It worked on everybody else's auto attack enhanced abilities, but just not Kled. They fixed this about 3 or 4 patches ago. So since then, that obviously increases the item's usefulness a lot to Kled, since a lot of his damage is from his W4th auto. And yeah, they also buffed Cleaver to be 30% shred, so it's not as, invalidated by the other pen items. Yeah, like I said, this is a very rare build, only for games where you're against very little percent HP damage. Most of the time you're going to stick with either AD pen heavy build or this type of build to match a tanky target. This is more of like a for fun thing. It can work in certain situations. Sometimes it's good, but most of the time you're building this, it's just like for fun, just because you want to play this type of build. You just have to be able to recognize when it's playable, when it's not. If they have a Vayne on their team, instantly I'm like, okay, well, I can't build it. If they have a Fiora, if they have a Irelia who's going to go Bork, you already know that. If they have any of that type of stuff, I'm like, okay, well, this build is no longer usable. And then these were just situational defensive options, not only for this build, but just for any build. If you need a defensive item, any of these are good options. GA used to be really common for me, but they made it way more expensive. And also they got rid of the stopwatch in the build path. So I haven't built it as much recently, but it's still a good option, especially if there's game deciding team fight coming up. And you can afford it. Still, always good. Randuin's is actually a really strong item right now. It's really cheap. It gives you a lot of armor, and it has a lot of crit damage reduction. What is it, 30%? Pretty sure. And crit items are very strong right now and very popular, so it's not uncommon for you to be against multiple crit champs. So just having one Randuin's as your only defensive item, it goes a long way. Jack Show is pretty much only paired with this type of build, just to give you some resist to match the HP. So obviously you have to give up one of these items, probably Hullbreaker, because Hullbreaker is situational. Maybe you already pushed enough towers, or you're going to be team fighting more, so you might switch it for Jack Show. And then the 2 MR options, they're only here if you're against a full AP comp, because if you're against AP, I'm usually going to build Maw. But like I said earlier, if it's a more DPS mage and you still want MR, you might choose a Force Nature instead. I mean, there's the one item gives you 125 MR total when the passive procs, and it stacks really fast, since against those type of champs, it's all multiple sources of damage hitting you. Like Azir, he hits you with 3 soldiers, plus his item procs, plus whatever. So it'll stack the passive very quickly. You know, something like a Niveo dot damage, like those type of stuff proc this passive like instantly, or at least very quickly. And then Visage is just if you are doing some kind of build with both healing and shielding. Excuse me. So if you have Ravenous and Eclipse, you know, Visage amplifies both healing and shielding. So it's pretty good with that item combo. Plus, if you have like maybe you have an enchanter on your team, like a Soraka or Sona or something, or you have Ocean Soul or something else to like amplify it, it's a good option. These are pretty much all the items I think I'd even consider buying. I don't think I missed any item. You know, I mean, I guess you can go Bork if you're against multiple HP stacking champs, but I prefer Eclipse since it's more AD and not attack speed. Attack speed is not really that useful. It's also cheaper. But the changes to Bork stat lineup made it a little bit better. Yeah, for the most part, I mean, there's a couple other really situational items, but for the most part, this is, you know, this is, I think, the most effective like item guide right now for Kled. I mean, if there's anything I left out or anything you don't understand or I didn't explain properly or you're just wondering something, you know, definitely ask me in the comments or on stream if you see me there. But yeah, I hope this helped. You know, I don't think there's going to be any big changes to items or runes, at least until the next split, which I don't think is for another like 2 months, a month or two. Definitely at least 2 months, I'm pretty sure. So this should be accurate until then, and of course if there is like, you know, big item rune changes that affect Kled, I'll definitely talk about that. But yeah, for now I think this is pretty good. I hope that answered everything, I hope that explained everything. But yeah, thank you for watching. You know, good luck in your games, and peace for now.